Welcome to Educators on Education, a webinar series for and by educators. We're thrilled to have you join us today for this very important topic, spotting the signs, equipping educators to recognize and respond to mental health concerns with our panelists, Pam Borsig, Tara Smith, Nancy Howe, and Brandi Provenzano. We're posting a poll to get a sense of how frequently you encounter mental wellness and health issues. Educators are on the front line. Sorry, I lost my script here. It's gone. So sorry. Educators are on the front line of mental health. They are the first to interact with their students. They see them on a daily basis, and they are watching for those warning signs at the beginning. This educator series is specifically designed to help educators across the country identify health and wellness issues and to give you strategies that you can use with your students tomorrow. We will be giving you resources at the end of the session, so please stay tuned to the end. My name is Charlotte Payton. I'm a partnership specialist with Study.com. I'm also an educator and a parent. When I was an educator, I saw the stress that students were under on a daily basis. And as a parent, I also witnessed the power of educators. My daughter struggled with anorexia nervosa, and she was saved, or a big part of her intervention was Brandi Provenzano, who happened to be a teacher at our school. So I know firsthand the power that educators can have as they come into contact with students on a daily basis. I'm going to introduce or allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So Pam, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, y'all. I'm Pam Borsig. I am currently the Dean of Student Success at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. A little bit about me. I'm a first-generation college student, and I share that with y'all because as a student, I didn't always use the resources that were available to me, and that's one of the lessons I hope you'll be able to share with your students today. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I've worked at a variety of colleges and universities all over the nation. So I've worked at large public, small private, community college, and at 2 career-focused institutions. My background is student affairs. And so for those of you that don't work in a college setting, kind of life outside the classroom for students. And that would include counseling, accessibility services, support services, on-campus housing, student engagement, pretty much anything outside of the classroom falls under student affairs. My entire career has focused on students' growth and development. And one of the things that I so appreciate is that students allow us to kind of be a part of their lives. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm going to pass it on to Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara Smith. Great to be here with everyone today. Actually, I am a work-based learning coordinator at Westwood High School in Richland School District 2 in Columbia, South Carolina. Also, I am the co-owner for Support Matters, LLC, where we support educators that can go anywhere from bus drivers and substitute teachers all the way to a superintendent. And so I am very, very excited to be here to share what does the high school classroom look like. I've had previous experience with the MTSS framework, and that is multi-tiered systems of supports. And that actually entails interventions. And one of those interventions includes the SEL, which is the social emotional learning outcomes. So I'm very happy to be here, and I am going to pass it on to Nancy.
Thanks, Tara. Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Howe. I'm the director of the Children's Program Team for NAMI, Minnesota. And for folks who aren't familiar with NAMI, NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness. We're a national nonprofit organization. We have a chapter in every state. So I work with the children's team here in Minnesota. And a lot of what we do is outreach. We teach classes to parents, caregivers, educators around early warning signs of mental illness and how to support others. We also go into high schools and middle schools and teach classes around early warning signs, how to help a friend, talking with students about how to get support for themselves. And then I'm also a family peer based on lived experience. My son, who is now 33, was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was about 15. So just lots of years of navigating the mental health system. And so in my role, primarily in educating community members around mental health and mental illness, and then also supporting families and parents who have a child or other loved one living with a mental illness. So I will popcorn to Brandi.
Hi, my name is Brandi Provenzano, and I had the pleasure of working with Charlotte when she was an educator at my school. And I am a single mom of 3 teenage boys. And if I seem distracted, they decided to start their laundry right now, in spite of all the signs that I have posted all over the house. So they all just got home from school. But I love my job. I'm lucky enough to get to do what I love every single day. And the kids are the reason. As a teacher, you know, you always run into the issues with all the different changing policies and things, but the one thing that pretty much stays the same is the fact that you have the opportunity to work with the kids. And even though the obstacles and the challenges they're facing are different than kids had 10 years ago, I'm finding they're still kids, you know, at their heart, they're still the same as they always were. They just appreciate a good, caring adult who looks out for them. I am an advocate for teachers. I'm a vice president of the teachers union in my state and in my county, but I'm also an advocate for kids because I believe that they need to have a whole system of support surrounding them. And I just am excited to be here today. So thank you.
Thanks, Brandi. Hello all, my name is Todd Blackmore. I also am a single parent, Brandi, and my daughter came home sick from school today, so hopefully she doesn't pop out of her room and ask for tomato soup. I'm a partnership manager here at Study.com for the Golden State of California. I have a daughter, as I mentioned, she's going to be graduating in 6 weeks from high school, and she's also the avid student body president. But during the COVID pandemic, my daughter struggled with depression and started to withdraw. She was exhibiting signs in her mental health that she was suffering due to the isolation of remote learning. So I learned firsthand as a single parent how to identify mental health issues and also search for tools and resources to help her in her mental health journey. She recently signed and accepted a letter to attend college this fall, and I couldn't be more proud of her. I also wanted to direct everyone in the webinar to the chat portion of the webinar. Please feel free to post any questions or comments. We're going to be monitoring that and we'll address them. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Charlotte.
We've got several questions for our guests, so we'll jump right in. The first question we'll have is, what do you see with students that worries you inside and outside of the classroom? And Nancy, you're the director of children's programs at NAMI, Minnesota, and you've been working with young adults and families, you know, before, during, and post-pandemic. Could you share with us kind of the state of mental wellness today?
No, happy to share. So what we're seeing when we're talking with parents and working with mental health providers is just high levels of anxiety and depression. Parents that I talk to will often just express concern about their child's safety, physical safety, as it relates to self-harming, perhaps even thoughts of suicide and that sort of thing. So we're just seeing higher acuity types of symptoms in teens and young adults, and even in the younger kiddos as well. So one of the things that we encourage parents and caregivers to do, and even educators to do, is if you are interacting with a student who you feel might be at risk in terms of their mental health, to just encourage that person to either reach out to a parent, a caregiver, but for them to find a trusted adult, right? Whether it's someone at school, counselor, teacher, coach, maybe a youth leader at their faith community on Wednesday nights, but just really encouraging them to reach out, find somebody that they trust that they can talk to and just share their concerns.
Thank you. It's a sad state, but it is good that we're addressing that, and we're going to give our educators some tools to help support those students. Brandi, could you answer, what are you seeing? You're a high school teacher, you're interacting with children on a daily basis, you're a parent of teenagers. How would you kind of summarize the state of mental wellness in young adults?
So I actually surveyed my students. I teach 9th and 11th graders. So I created a survey, which I believe Charlotte has a copy of that you guys could see at the end, where I wanted to find out from the kids themselves, because we always know what we think we know about the kids, but I knew that they would kind of be more honest and upfront. One of the surprising factors that came out of the survey had to do with social media. I know that my students are greatly impacted by their cell phones. And I think any educator in the room right now is probably feeling frustrated with the state of the cell phone in the classroom if your division or schools allow them. They're very hard to regulate, and kids are addicted to them, as many adults are. But the survey, I was expecting to see responses related to peer interactions and their cell phones. I was surprised at how many, both male and female across all demographics, talked about body image and their perceptions of themselves and how they compare themselves to those people on social media. They follow different people on TikTok or social media, and they are bombarded with images of the perfect body and super successful people who are very young, who made it rich very quickly, and these lifestyles that are kind of empty and unattainable. And so many of my students reference that. I also know that, online bullying is an issue, and we used to talk about it quite a bit, and then it seemed like it kind of died away. But students told me that that is another problem, is having a picture shared of you. We had a group that was created at our school that we had to get rid of. What the sole purpose of the group was to share embarrassing things and pictures of people in the school. Students created it. We found out about it and were able to shut it down. But there seems to be this lack of ability to understand the impact of their actions on other people. And so the whole social media and cell phone problem is something that I'm very interested in, and I'm working with my kids daily to kind of get to the heart of that.
That's interesting. I mean, we all know social media is an issue. And when you think about it, of course, the body image is linked to that. They're seeing fake photos, they're seeing all those things. But it's interesting to hear that the students perceive that too. Tara, can you share with us what you're seeing with the students that you're interacting with?
Sure. Typically, I work with 11th and 12th graders, those seniors and juniors who are about to enter into either being employed, being enlisted, or being enrolled. And for them, the uncertainty of what in the world am I going to do after high school? So you sense the fear, but there's so much reticence that you can see throughout the hallways as students meander throughout their school, where they're uncertain. There's a lot of fear. And then also with the fear comes the anger. If you ever address a student and they don't want to talk to you and they're shying away from you, a lot of times they don't want to have any type of engagement. And so you can sense, just sometimes we mistake the anger for fear, and then the fear for anger. And you really have to understand which one is which, and understanding what the student actually that you're talking to, or you brush throughout the hallways, what they actually need and what they desire. And so when we are working with students in terms of what does the workplace look like for them, what career goals they may have, they're uncertain. And so that uncertainty, we remember being little kids, we always knew what we wanted to be when we grew up. Did that always happen, or did that take place? No, but we had an idea. And so typically now what our students, we're so uncertain, and even parents are uncertain. So those are some of the things that we are really facing and being confronted with.
Thank you so much. Todd, do you want to give us a little, oh, sorry, if we're moving to Pam, I am all out of order. So Pam, can you share with us what you're seeing? You've got a slightly different group. Tara's working with those kids getting ready to go to college and helping them navigate that. And you've got the kids as they're coming into college. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing.
Sure. A couple things I would say at the college level. And the first is that worries me, students that don't have realistic academic and/or career expectations. An example that I would give to you at my previous institution is a community college, and the largest major was nursing. And so students that were like, well, I want to be a nurse, but had failed math and/or science classes multiple times. So that unrealistic expectations about academics and career, that just because you want something doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Second thing is really the lack of engagement. And by that, I don't mean who talks the most, but students that are just seemingly kind of not able to engage, and tied with that, a lack of self-esteem. And you often hear students when you ask, why are you in college? It's not unusual to get the response, well, my parents wanted me to be here, or my parents wanted me to study this. And higher education, no matter kind of what venue you're in, it's hard. And just kind of wanting it isn't going to be enough. And it's the ability to do the work that's going to be important, which you've heard some of the folks talk about. So those would be the items that I would say concern me at the college level.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that realistic idea of what students can really attain and what they want, I think that kind of goes into the whole social media pressure of what they see, what's desirable, what they want to do, not always what they're really interested in or what they're capable of doing. So those are great points.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I took copious notes during that exchange. One of the common themes that seemed to come up was fear of the future and the uncertainty of what's going to happen next. And thinking to my daughter and some of the things to help her process was setting realistic expectations, to your point, Pam, and praising the effort and not the results. I always wanted to make sure that my daughter knew, regardless of what grade she got on an exam, that it was her effort that put forth. And so that sort of commonality. And I think, Brandi, you also mentioned something that really struck a chord with me about students finding embarrassing things to show other students. That really shows sort of a lack of empathy. And for me, one of the things that I have tried diligently to work with my daughter is to make sure that you find someone somewhere someday and make a positive impact in their life, even if you do not know them, but to reach out and have sort of a random act of kindness, if you will. So thank you so much for sharing. Charlotte, back to you.
Thank you. We are on to our second question. So what are some of the warning signs educators should be looking for? We're also launching a quick poll for you to share your experience. So we'll be interested to see what you're seeing in the classroom. We also have that chat. So if you wanted to add comments in the chat as you're listening in, that would be wonderful. So Brandi, can you tell us what are some things that you're seeing that tell you, okay, this is a warning, I need to keep my eye on this student, or I need to reach out to the student and start building a relationship?
So oddly enough, what I think I see as warning signs are impacting the majority of students. So I don't see that I have that one student or those two students. I see collectively that the kids are kind of in crisis. And what I'm seeing are students with AirPods in their ears all day long. And they are completely isolating themselves by not engaging with other people. During the pandemic, they kind of missed out on the very formative experiences they need for their brain development and I always tell the kids this, their brains at this age are wired for pleasure and social acceptance. And they basically didn't get either one of those during the pandemic. When they came back into the classroom, they didn't know how to be in the classroom. And there's a lot of pressure on teachers to kind of get things going because we have all this learning loss. And so a lot of teachers just jumped right in. For me, when I saw the kids come back, there was no talking, there was no interacting. Students wanted to work by themselves. They wanted to tune out, constantly on their phones, asking to work alone. So for me, I think there are, of course, students that you can identify right away that seem to be severely at risk. But I think all of these kids are at risk if we don't proactively do something to create an environment in our classrooms where they can reconnect with their peers. And so the number one thing for me is giving them that opportunity and not allowing them to put the hoodie on, put the earbuds in, and crawl into their phones. Because what's happened is that has created a lot of anxiety because they do not know how to interact with each other and they aren't getting these low risk opportunities to do so. So I'm more concerned of the kids as a whole, but obviously the warning signs of things like absenteeism, not interested in all in their grades or success or finding success in the class. No one wants to be a failure. No one wants to sit there and fail day in and day out. And so disengagement, putting their heads down, things like that, I just try to see as kind of like they want help, but they just don't know how to ask for it.
Yeah, I was going to say almost like a cry for help by hiding, right? That's one way to hopefully invite a teacher in or a counselor in or someone, a trusted adult. Tara, can you share with us, what are you observing with your students?
As my colleague just finished indicating, that it is the hoodie that gives me pause. And I do work along with students and parents and faculty and staff in terms of interventions and what they are to look like. It's unbelievable how much you want a lot of our students that want to hide. They're disengaged, but also, again, using the fear and the apprehension of even trying. And so a lot of times you have to use the language that they sometimes use so they can identify with you, but more so how they hide, how they are just alone, the aloneness and feeling lonely in a corner by themselves, no one's around. And that part to me is a telltale sign for how students are really, really experiencing loneliness. And does it happen not only at school, but after school? What does that look like? And so you have to wonder as an educator, wow, if I followed this kid home, what would that be? And so you have to ask yourself questions of, okay, does the student actually feel safe? Or are they being bullied? Is something going on at home that's a disturbance and they're embarrassed? And so you can tell even this generation, especially our Gen Zers, they get embarrassed very easily. And so the least little thing you can probably just joke about, sometimes they could probably be very embarrassed. So those kinds of things really are alarms, if I may say that. And so those are some of the warning signs.
So you mentioned fear. And, I think as a parent, I was thinking, okay, they're just avoiding, but I didn't really connect it with fear. Do you think that's like fear of failure or fear of interaction or fear of exposure?
It is all of them, because our students these days do not like confrontation, even if it's with something that's actually good, because the apprehension has them in a place where they're either stumbled or stopped. And so it's important that you kind of know where those signs are for them, and how to teeter-totter in terms of, what they're going to need from you. But you cannot just dive into students who are really, really not real resilient in wanting to talk to you, and they're disengaged.
Thank you. And I know in our next segment, you're going to tell us some strategies to help with those students. So there are some solutions coming our way. Pam, can you tell us what you're seeing? You've again got those, early college students. What are you seeing that alarms you, or that are good warning signs to keep an eye on?
A couple of things. And the first one I would say is changes in behavior. So students that all of a sudden are angry all the time or anxious all the time, that's a big one. And we hear from kind of faculty, they'll come and they'll say, what's going on with this student? Because this is not how they were kind of early on in the semester. Another one would be excessive absences. And at the college level, different institutions are going to be different. So some may have attendance policies, others aren't. But students that, again, are, if they're starting to be absent all the time, I mean, that's a big change. But probably the biggest one is what I'm going to call lack of self-care. And you've heard Brandi and Tara talk a lot about hoodies. We see that at the college level, but to add to that, students in terms of lack of self-care, that all of a sudden that hoodie hasn't been washed in weeks and has perhaps taken on a life of its own. So kind of the lack of self-care, students not showing up, students that seem distracted more than other times. And most colleges and universities have early warning systems in place where faculty or staff, if they're concerned about changes in behavior, can kind of reach out, and student affairs staff are going to reach out to that student. But when you kind of lump all those together, kind of the changes in the behavior, lack of self-care, lack of self-esteem, excessive absences, those are the things that we pay attention to.
And I suppose in college, these kids are now responsible for their own self-care and their own. So that's a much clearer sign that something's wrong than if it was happening at a high school level, I would think.
Absolutely. And I know this is sometimes hard for parents and educators, but at the college level, we're going to treat students like adults, even when they don't act like it, and hold them accountable. And so, part of it is teaching students how to advocate for themselves. Tara mentioned about students kind of becoming more resilient. And I will tell you, when they get to college, that is still a skill that they're working on, that, like the rest of us, they're probably going to be working on for life.
That's wonderful.
An important one.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
Nancy, you get to wrap it up with what you've seen. And I know that you're not in the classroom, so you're seeing things outside in the community and interacting with families. So tell us what warning signs to look out for.
I think there's elements in what everyone is saying here, absolutely spot on by everyone. So when we're thinking about early warning signs, typically what we see is fear and avoidance of others, a level of distractibility, so harder to concentrate and focus, maybe complete assignments. For students who are really maybe struggling with some more severe depression, feelings of hopelessness, irritability. One of the warning signs of depression in teen and young men, boys and young men, is anger. It tends to be the way depression manifests itself. There's also a couple of things that I would like to just piggyback on here. So statistically, so Tara, you had mentioned wondering if a student has been bullied and maybe that's why they're withdrawing and seem to be in distress. And statistically, 80% of students by the time they're 14 have experienced some form of bullying. whether it's through social media, in the classroom, whatever, which is a remarkably high percentage, right? And then I think just mentioning the traumatizing impact of COVID, right? I mean, we had students of all ages who were used to going into a classroom who are now suddenly being told it's not safe to go into a classroom. It's not safe to go out. You have to learn everything on this screen, right? And now that COVID is mostly past, which makes sense for safety. I'm not being critical by any stretch, but I'm just saying in terms of the psychological effect. And now we're saying, you know, for this last several months, you need to go out into the community, go to school. You're on your screen too much. You're on your phone too much, you know? And so I was sharing with a group a situation I was in a team meeting actually, and a couple months ago, and one of my coworkers looked at me and she said, I'm just really having trouble with my social skills right now. So point in sharing that is, you know, we're adults who for the most part have pretty well developed coping skills and those types of things and can regulate our emotions. Well, think about how that would be for a, you know, a young student, even a teen or young adult. They're disoriented, they're distressed, they're anxious. One of my colleagues that works in the mental health clinic at the University of Minnesota here shared that they're estimating up to between 30 and 35% of the young adult freshmen coming into the U have some level of diagnosable anxiety and or depression. So statistically, it's very high. And I think, you know, again, just working with parents and families, one of the things that we really stress is just that early intervention piece. So when you're thinking about ways to support your students, and just thinking about context and your relationship with that student, thinking about the degree to which perhaps you could have a conversation with them or provide them with resources to get some help. But yeah, very pervasive, and early intervention is very important.
Well, I'm thinking about, as you mentioned, the changing requirements, right? This is okay now, and now we're not, and now it's okay again. That's very confusing, even for adults, to think, okay, wait, the guidelines keep changing, the rules keep changing. It's a lot of adapting we're asking them to do in a then kind of scary situation. So it's not surprising, really, to see that that's a really high rate of anxiety and depression, sadly. All right, so our third question is more about what can we do with this? We've talked about warning signs. We've talked about the state of mental wellness or mental health with our young adults. What can we actually do as educators to support these students? So my first question is for Tara. What are you doing, or what do you suggest that folks do to help support these young adults?
Sure. There was a school, two schools actually, at Sumter High School in Sumter, South Carolina, as well as Ridgeview High School in Columbia, South Carolina. I had the opportunity of not only doing interventions, but also had the opportunity of preventing some of those things that we actually encounter every day. And so you have to be creative. And there was always times that I was always looking at AVID strategies. And I think Todd mentioned those things earlier, but it's important that they may seem a little menial and they may seem like, oh, that's not a big deal, but they really work. And so one of them is using language that actually the students use. Sometimes you may be out of your scope a little bit, and you may sound a little silly, and someone may even say to you like, oh, that lady doesn't know what she's talking about. But then after a while, you're starting to not only just build a relationship, but build community. And our schools need community. Of course, we know that they are actually institutions of learning, but we need the word community to be highly involved now, more than ever. So one of the things that I really enjoy is the 2x10 relationship builder. And so one of the things that I was able to do was I found a student who was not in my program at the time, I didn't know the student, but if that student was meandering through the hallways, through the corridors of the hours of learning, then I just grabbed that particular student and I had a 2-minute conversation with that young person for 10 days consecutively. And before I knew it, I had a latchkey student. And it was ironic. I thought it would not really work, but it did work. And I think those types of strategies that we're able to use, there are plenty of strategies, best practices that are available with the usage of AVID. Those things actually really work very well. But language is a big part of who we are and what we're going to become. And so we cannot ignore now when a student says, hey, I'm in my feelings. That can mean anything these days. So you can't just toss that to the side as if that's non-existent. So we have to make sure that we know their lingo, we know their everyday language, even down to texting. You know, now there's like not even 3 letters of a part of a word. Now they're just 1 letter now. So you have to know what those things actually mean so you can be able to identify with that particular student.
So kind of meeting the student where they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Nancy, could you share with us what are some things that parents and educators can do to support their kids? Oh, you're on mute.
Of course, I'm on mute. Sorry about that, everyone.
No worries.
All right, so I love the 2x10 strategy. I think that's really, really brilliant and I'm sure highly effective. So one of the things that we can see happening with teens and young adults is, you know, really not wanting to acknowledge perhaps that they may be developing a mental health challenge. We know that stigma and discrimination is real in our communities around mental illness. And so when we're approaching them and having these conversations, maybe trying to keep in mind that they may be dealing with what we call internal stigma. And basically what we mean by that is they don't want to be different than their peers, right? And so thinking about how to approach it in a way that kind of normalizes the fact that mental illnesses are medical illnesses, just like physical ones. It's nobody's fault if they develop a mental illness. It's a medical condition that needs to be treated, right? And so also what can work, I think, really well too, is just increased transparency by us as parents and caregivers, kind of normalizing it by sharing our personal experiences, you know, showing empathy during whatever stage they're in. So for example, maybe they're transitioning between high school and college and just sharing, hey, that was really hard for me too. You know, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but it's okay. And that's what school is about, is exploring our options and learning who we are and really coming from a place of empathy with them. The other thing too, if you do have a child or a student who you are concerned about, just when you're thinking about the conversation, we suggest actually having a list of resources at your fingertips, right? Especially for educators, the crisis line number, maybe a list of crisis places within your individual community. So if you do have the conversation, the student does start disclosing, then you can at least feel like you're offering them some tangible assistance. And the other thing too, I think timing for conversations is really important as well. We have a saying that basically says, you know, let's open the door to conversation, but let's not push them through it, right? So if they're not in a place where they feel like they can talk with us, maybe approaching it again at another time, but just listening with empathy, with respect, not judging what they say or criticizing what they say, and truly just sitting with them in that moment and sharing those experiences with them that way, you know, as a supportive person. So.
Thank you. I think that you brought up stigma, and we all know that, right? We've all experienced that, whether it's, you know, having heard it or faced it ourselves or watched our children go through it. And I keep hearing you say what equates to meet the student where they are, let them be themselves and accept them, and then be a support to them. So thank you. That was all wonderful advice for us. So Pam, can you share with us what you suggest that educators can do, especially in that older college-aged student?
Sure. The first thing I would say is give students permission to focus on their health. At the end of the day, students' kind of mental health, emotional health, and physical health are most important. To parents, I would say, let your students kind of live their life. And what I mean by that, I understand that parents are oftentimes paying the bill, but this is students' life. So let them kind of study what they are interested in, not for parents. This is not your chance to relive your college experience. Let it go. And I think asking students, what are they passionate about? What are they excited about? And that could be painting, it could be culinary school, you know, it could be history. It's not, but that's going to be core, because at the end of the day, for students, if it's not something they're excited or passionate about, that's what's going to get them through the hard times. I mentioned at the beginning, at the intro, that I'm a first-generation college student. And I'm a first-generation college student that as an undergrad was not always good about using campus resources. I mean, I was horrible. So I would say to students, there's so many campus resources available, and they're all available for free. So whether that's counseling or the health center or your academic advisor or requesting accommodations if you have a disability, talking to your instructor. I mean, it is heartbreaking. And I see this at the end of every semester, and I'm seeing it where I am right now because we're in finals week. Had a student come in today and they're like, I'm not doing well in my classes. What can I do now? And they're like, I didn't know any of these resources were available to me. And so it's about using the resources, and it is teaching students kind of how to advocate for themselves. And that, again, going back to learning to be resilient. We don't expect students to do that on their own, but there are certainly some life lessons. So those are the things that I would offer up.
Yeah, that the self-advocacy, I think I've heard that, you know, frequently, and we know with college students that is like, they're not just someone, you know, in high school you're obligated to support that student, and in college that student's obligated to request the support. So there's a big change in how they have to maneuver through all those things. So I think that might be the most valuable thing. Teach those young kids as they're going into college that they have to learn to self-advocate.
Well, and we are caringly intrusive is the phrase that I use.
I love that.
To kind of help them as they make that transition.
Yeah. Great. So we're kind of swinging down to Brandi, who's dealing with 9th graders and 11th graders. What are some things that you suggest to support those kids as they're rising through the difficult years of high school?
So this is the one where you might have to cut me off because I have just so many ideas. My own son, who is now almost 18 and he's graduating, at the beginning of this school year, he suffered a mental health crisis. And one of the things I quickly learned is that the mental health system is overwhelmed right now. There are not enough people to take care of our kids. And that got me thinking. Of course, I started thinking, well, what can we do about that? But then I started thinking, what if we caught the kids before they spiral out of control and end up in the mental hospital in need of assistance. And so if we could catch them earlier instead of trying to fix it later. And some of the things that I think are critical, and I haven't really spoke about very much this time, is I think the cell phones and the social media are a huge hindrance to these kids, because if they're allowed access throughout the day, it is like constant stream happening to them, ding, 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 and they can't actually interact with the people in front of them. With the survey that I asked my students, I was surprised to hear students say, I don't know how to identify how I'm feeling, and I don't know how to help other people with their feelings. I would have never expected that from 9th graders and 11th graders on a survey that, you know, the questions weren't leading necessarily to that. It said, what do you want adults to understand? And to hear them say they can't even identify how they're feeling, much less help other students. So I think to create an environment in the classroom that is free of those distractions and free of social media. Put the phones away. I have mine. They go in the backpacks. The backpack has to be zipped. The earbuds, they have to come out. We stand there at the beginning of class, and I wait for every single student to take the earbuds out, put them in their backpacks, put the phone. I do give them time breaks and things where they can access them. The kids at first, they don't like it. But what happens is this organic thing where their brains get to do what their brains are supposed to do, which is interact with each other. And this, I have to model this from day one, and I don't really get into curriculum, and I have a lot of flexibility because I close my door and I do what I want to do. My principal lets me do that because he trusts me. I know everyone can't do that, but the first month of school is all about these kind of experiences where we build respect. I show vulnerability. I tell them about my dyslexia and my ADD. When I say I have ADD, the kids always snicker because they think I'm joking. Like they think I'm making fun, you know, they think I'm saying like, oh, I'm ADD. And I said, no, I really am ADD. Like, I'm not saying I am, I have that. And so I model for them things like staying organized. I show them what my purse looks like and how I lose things all the time. And I go over how I manage that and try to help them come up with systems. I just want to touch on the anxiety piece. I think one of the problems that we're having with the anxiety is that we don't know what to do about those kids not wanting to participate and interact. And so instead of guiding them safely to those interactions, we're allowing them to retreat into their phones and into that silence, which is part of the main problem. So I'll share that my own middle schooler this year, for the first time ever, he's always been a straight A student, hockey star. This kid, he didn't ever study. He had school avoidance and he started having anxiety. His face would turn white in the morning and he did not want to go to school. And we tried everything. This is how this went on all year long. We've had therapists, interventions, all these different things. Finally, I met with the school attendance officer and I said, I want you to scare the crap out of him. And she said, okay. And I said, because this kid is loved. This kid is nurtured. This kid is getting what he needs at home. He's got a huge support system. But right now, we need to lovingly push him over that boundary, or else we're going to be sitting here 3 years from now. And she did lovingly scare him in that meeting, along with me. And it was a group of adults, and we did scare. We were honest. And she said, do you know what will happen if you don't go to school? And he said, I think they're going to take my mom to court. And she said, no, because your mom is doing everything she can do to get your butt into school. She said, you will be the one who will be going before the judge and explaining why you're not coming to school. She was, and at one point in the meeting, I thought, oh my gosh, I probably just put my kid in therapy for more years. But what I realized was we have, with COVID, become so scared of giving kids consequences and holding them accountable because they're so fragile in our minds that we're doing the opposite of what we want to do. And we're creating these fragile kids. And we have to lovingly, and I say this lovingly, we have to push them a little bit. We need to give the consequences. We need to make grades count. We need to do those things. And then we follow it up with like the love and the strategies and how I can help. So I just really believe strongly, especially thinking about what Pam was talking about with college. We are not preparing kids for college. We're not preparing them for the real world by building this bubble around them where they can't fail. Because if they do fail, an adult will jump in and fix it for them. The years in high school, it should be okay to fail, and they should have safe places to do it. But they should also see me fail And I talk to them about that. I fail all the time. So they need to see it, and they need to see other people failing and see that it's acceptable. So I really would just emphasize that we need to be loving, responsible educators and build that environment where we are holding them accountable. We are not going to allow kids to sit in our class with hoodies on and earbuds in and tune out the world, because that is not going to help them the day they graduate from high school. We need to get them ready for that.
You just explained why it's so important to teach accountability, right? That's part of that, getting them ready to be launched into the real world.
Well, I appreciate the depth and breadth of information that's been shared. And just to recap on a few of the strategies and ways that I've heard that we can support students. Brandi, you just mentioned, make room for failure, but also, praise the process, praise students as they go and support them as they go. And one of the things that I used repeatedly was repeated assurances. Hey, we're going to get through this together. I found myself unemployed during the first portion of COVID, and my daughter got to watch me struggle, but she also got to watch me problem solve. And to your point, Brandi, when someone sees a parent or an authority figure or a caregiver struggle with something and then resolve that struggle, they get to watch positive modeling on how to work through that process. And Tara, something you mentioned about AVID. The AVID program has been a just wonderful set of tools and resources for my daughter. Brandi, to your point about being organized and learning how to study and learning how to be prepared. And I guess one of the last things that stood out to me was, and I think Brandi, you may have mentioned this, but I heard it come up multiple times before, is being able to reach students with their attention span. My daughter has an Instagram attention span sometimes, and it's really short and really hard for her to stay focused and engaged with me and have eye contact with me. Hoodies for her were a cloak of invisibility. She felt when she put her hoodie on, she could disappear. And I'm like, hey kid, let me pull that down. Let me see your beautiful ojos. She's in AP Spanish. And so I try to speak with her in Spanish as much as possible. But engaging her and making solid eye contact, that's one of the things for me that's really a key for finding out if a student is really there and really engaged with you. And at this point, if anyone has any other questions they'd like to address the group, please post them in the chat now. And we'll also be posting our final poll. And we'll also be sharing some helpful tools and resources that we've combined as in a collective group. And we'll be forwarding those out to you to the email addresses that you registered for this webinar. And again, thank you to everyone who has helped make this collective group so dynamic. Charlotte, back to you.
Yeah, I wanted to thank our panelists, Brandi, Pam, Nancy, and Tara, for taking the time to meet with us multiple times to think so thoughtfully and carefully about what you were going to share today. I know it's been valuable for me. I'm watching the chat. I know it's valuable for our audience too. So thank you so much. I know that this was time that you spent, just out of your volunteerism. So thank you so much for that. We are going to be sending out resources. I saw one question about that. So we have a PDF that Tara has created for early warning signs. It's something that you can paste to your desk or your door or in your quiet corner. Keep a copy in your folder, your notebook. So that'll be coming to you too. And then we also have NAMI's How to Help, a friendly courtesy of Nancy Howe. And we have Brandi's survey that we can share out with you as well if you want to have a copy of that survey to distribute to your students. And then we also have some Study.com links to teacher resources for early warning signs and interventions and strategies you can use with your students that you're concerned about. So anybody else have a question for our panelists? We have a few more minutes left. I do have one here that came in. What advice do you have for a teacher who already feels overwhelmed with all the responsibilities? Brandy,
Can
I
I
see your,
answer
yeah,
that
I was
one?
gonna say, see your microphone off, so take it away.
All right, well, I think every school is different, every district is different. But I think a lot of what teachers, we've been expected to do everything for so long that we try to do everything. And we can't solve all the world's problems. We cannot. I think most teachers are overwhelmed with grading and assessing and the emotional issues and the kids not coming to school and the makeup assignments and the retakes. And there's so much. One of the strategies I mentioned previously with my colleagues with grading students, I don't actually assign a grade to a student if they're not achieving, like if they are writing a paragraph and clearly they will not, it's not a successful paragraph. I only provide feedback to them and then they have to fix it. And they'll say, well, what would my grade be if I don't fix it? And I say, well, that's not an option. So I teach them that them giving up on themselves is not an option. But what happens by not putting that grade in the grade book is it alleviates a lot of the stress because the parents see the grades and then they text the kid and the kid is stressed. So I try to kind of think of grading in a different way to make it an agreement between me and the students and me and the parents. The other thing I would say for educators that are drowning is I would highly recommend, there's a lot of Facebook groups, I'm in a lot of them, where people share resources and ideas and their struggles and they give each other advice, and it's teachers or educators or counselors doing that. I can't emphasize how many times I've thought, oh my gosh, I have nothing to teach for X, Y, and Z. And somebody says, oh, I have that. So I think just being a part of a community, if you can find that community, whether it's online or in your building, but there's no easy answer to the being overwhelmed as an educator. It's just figuring out the battles. And if you establish things in the beginning of the year, you can eliminate a lot of the behavioral battles within your own classroom at the beginning of the year so that you can actually get to the academics of learning.
That's a great response. Does anyone else have more to add to that?
For me, it's more of leading is okay to lean, and leaning is okay to lead. And I lean on my leadership quite a bit. And I have to say, there are more than available. And I know some people may say, hey, I don't have that opportunity. Or, of course, adults experience the reticence themselves and they shy away because either it may be a place where for them they're uncomfortable, or whether they feel as though, well, I've seen them not really be in a happy place and I don't want that experience. So, but I have learned to lean on my leadership for answers, for solutions. And also, I think we need to go back to the community here again, not just using the word school, but community. And I do utilize my parents because they have resources that we have not tapped into that are readily available because they are out in the community. And some of them will tell you, all you have to do is ask me. And so I ask. Absolutely.
That is great suggestion. Anybody else want to add into that? The other one was, how can we build student confidence? Anybody want to add to that? We have about 2 minutes left, so if you don't want to, we can.
I don't want to dominate, but I did want to say that I think what we've done in the past, we've done a disservice to our students because we've held them to a very low standard. And that low standard, when a student is praised for doing the bare minimum, it actually has the opposite effect on them because then they feel like, I'll give you a quick example. My son, the 17-year-old, he is in special education, and in 9th grade, his math teacher decided that he was just going to get hundreds on everything, but he didn't really get the hundreds. And I knew that. So I was like calling the parent teacher conference, and the teacher said, this is the first time I've had a parent say, I want you to fail my student. And I said, I do. I want you to give him the grade he has, because then you're responsible for helping him learn it. When you put 100 in the grade book, don't you dare tell my son, you're not even teachable. So I'm going to give you 100 because you can't learn. So I would say, the best way to build their self-esteem is to start with where they can do something. But these real learning experiences where you don't allow them to turn in crap, and I hate to use that word, but I don't know a better word, where you don't allow them to just, oh, there it is, here, take it. But you actually say, oh, let me show you. I think you know more than you think you know. And then holding them to a level of accountability. I think one of the reasons kids are really struggling with their self-esteem right now is everybody's spoon feeding them, and everyone's, it's almost like we don't believe in you that you could do it on your own. So we're going to break the textbook down into PowerPoints, and then I'm going to explain every single word of it because I don't expect that you can read, and I'm not going to give you the scaffolding to get you there. So I feel really strongly it's our responsibility to give them what they can be successful at and continuously push them to get better, and not to let them sit on, well, I've always been a C student in English, I can't write. Or the kid that's been passed along and never been actually taught. That sends a message that you're not worth our time to sit down and really teach you. So for me, that would probably be the number one. And turn off the phones during school day so that they're not bombarded with all those social media messages. And I'm happy somebody asked for my email. I'm happy to put my email in the chat. Yeah, I'll gladly do that.
I will share that out. Thank you very much. Thank you all again. You've done an incredible job preparing us to better support our students, to identify warning signs as students are struggling. So thank you again. There is a survey at the end. When you close your browser, you'll be driven to that survey, and it'll help us design future episodes. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope that you have something wonderful to take away for tomorrow's class.
Charlotte, I just wanted to jump in and say thank you for taking a leadership role in this Educator on Educator series. This has been a wonderful exchange of information, and thank you for doing that.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, y'all.